Now, the South African retirement industry is heading for a big shake-up, with government reforms firmly focused on simplifying retirement products and bringing down costs. Asset managers will need to cope with increasing regulation, and analysts say indifference to changes in this legislative environment will not be an option. Tomisho Maganyele reports.
It's a Tuesday morning in Meadowlands, Soweto, and 76-year-old Elizabeth Rantsole reminisces about her days working in a Johannesburg steel factory.
I used to work very hard for many years in a steel factory. We used to dip the metal pieces in steam to restore the metal.
Upon retirement age, Elizabeth withdrew her pension package, the value of which she can't now recall, but says eventually ran out. She now faces the cold reality of having to look after her 2 grandchildren while counting every cent in what were meant to be her golden years.
I get approximately 1,000 from the government grant. With that, I use 300 for groceries, and the rest is all for school expenses and other costs that aren't always covered.
People do something. I just got two something on report.
This is the reality for pensioners. According to the National Treasury, only 10% of South Africans are able to maintain their pre-retirement standard of living when they leave work.
If you reach the age of retirement, there's a good chance you'll live longer. And longer could easily mean 80, 90 years. So if you think about it, you manage to work so hard, save enough for your retirement, you buy an annuity, and it only lasts you 10 years, and you've got another 20 years to live.
As part of his 2013 National Budget Address in Parliament in February, Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan announced several pension fund reforms, including plans to introduce tax preference savings and investment accounts in 2015.
The tax treatment of pension, provident and retirement annuity funds will be simplified and harmonized.
Currently, you are allowed to withdraw from the fund, and you will get taxed on the withdrawal from the fund. Proposed legislation is, depending on when you join the fund, you'll only be able to withdraw once, and the amount that you will withdraw will be at a set amount. So that what you have is what the government is trying to achieve, and that is you will always have an amount that will be carried forward to one day enable you to have a bit of money to be able to retire and to be able to subsist.
The reforms aim to increase the level of participation in pension funds through the establishment of a national social security fund. They are also expected to simplify and reduce costs of post-retirement products, with proposals like cutting out the middleman.
The argument from National Treasury often is that intermediaries have a tendency to want products to be complicated so that they have a space to advise. Because if you know more than the consumer, then you become useful. But I think that view by any person in this industry is short-sighted.
Asset management companies have come under fire not only for the complexity of their products, but the costs associated with them. Managing Director of Investments at Liberty, David Lloyd, however, doesn't agree with the correlation.
I must admit, I've yet to see any studies that show that additional portfolios create additional costs. I mean, the industry is actually quite efficient, it's quite competitive.
But there are industry players who welcome the cost-cutting initiative.
Commissions are regulated quite severely in South Africa, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but it's regulated. But costs of asset managers, performance fees and things are not as regulated. And National Treasury has now, I think, put a finger on it.
The National Treasury is also calling for greater involvement by trustees.
We want trustees to be involved right from the moment you join a fund, right up until you retire. So they tend to focus a lot on you being a member. And when you exit the fund, you are left on your own.
This would require greater administration and human resources, and someone will have to foot the bill. National Treasury says the individual will not directly incur costs, as they would be absorbed by the default fund, and these costs should be relatively small given economies of scale. While the reforms are necessary in improving South Africa's savings culture, there may be unintended consequences.
When a person is forced to leave their jobs, they should have access to the funds. Otherwise, we are only contributing to the problem. I mean, what's the use of having a retirement fund with money in there and only being able to withdraw a small amount, and you're starving at home, unable to pay for your lights, etc.
Investment companies may also need to start making greater use of passive investment instruments like exchange-traded funds. However, with the drive for simpler and cheaper products, this raises questions around whether this could be the end of product differentiation and if standardization is the most appropriate approach for all market segments. But how are asset managers reacting to this?
I'm looking forward to reform. To me, reform is opportunity. The only thing I would say is for National Treasury is reform means cost. So any change you make always has pretty significant legacy costs, and therefore if I have to make changes to my existing book of business, I have to change the charges that I charge people. Otherwise I'm going to change what was currently a profit-making book into a loss-making book.
There are other reasons industry players are approaching the reform with caution.
It's going to take more than these reforms on stopping people gaining access to just a certain amount of money. It's going to address a certain issue, but it may be just putting a plaster on a wound that needs serious attention.
If all goes according to plan, in less than 3 years, we should see fundamental changes in South Africa's retirement landscape. If all goes according to plan, in less than 3 months, we should see fundamental changes in South Africa's retirement landscape. But until then, pensioners like Elizabeth will continue living hand to mouth. Tumisho Machanyele, Johannesburg.